Hello, I'm Kelda Yoon. We begin in North York, where we are learning more tonight about the victims of yesterday's daytime shooting that left 3 people dead and shut down nearby schools and a daycare. Let's get right to our Dale Manukduk, who is outside the building near Don Mills and Lawrence, where the shooting happened. And Dale, what are you learning tonight?
Yeah, Kelly, if you'll remember, Toronto police yesterday said that among those found dead were 2 men and 1 woman, and that one of the deceased was believed to be the shooter. Well, just 45 minutes ago, Toronto police releasing some new information. They have identified 2 of the victims. They say one of them is 54-year-old Arash Misaji of Toronto, and the other person is 44-year-old Samira Yousefi of Concord. They also say a 46-year-old man is believed to be the shooter. He was the 3rd person found dead. Now, I did speak to 2 people who work in this building behind me at 25 Mallard Road. One is a graphic designer who has some office space and a studio inside the building. The other is a realtor who works in the building 2 days a week. Both of them say that the 2 victims were partners in a real estate investment or property management business. We do know yesterday that Toronto police said that what happened was an altercation relating to some financial transaction. Now, what's interesting about this building, Kelda, is there is no markings of this financial business, this real estate business. We did catch up with local councillor John Burnside. Here's what he had to say.
I'm here almost every day next door. I knew about the daycare and the school, but wasn't aware of exactly what else was going on in terms of financial, the financial institution. I have had people call the office, but most people I think are waiting to find out exactly what happened. Because as we know, when it hits close to home, people are obviously have a heightened sense of concern, and people are just trying to understand what happened, whether it was work-related or otherwise targeted or whatever the case might be.
You heard him say that there was some heightened concern when things hit close to home. One of the major things that happened yesterday was all the chaos about the schools and the daycare being put on lockdown. There were those scenes yesterday of infants being wheeled out in cribs to their parents or being passed off by police officers into their parents' arms. And we do have some updates on how that daycare is doing. There were some normal operations today. However, they did have to bring in children through the west side of the building, as this building is still being held by police. I did speak to one of the supervisors who said 44 of the 57 students at the daycare did come to school, but some families do need some more time.
The morning was pretty quiet. We came here 7 o'clock in the morning. We opened at 7:30, but we just wanted to be here early to support some of the families coming in, just to reassure them, like, hey, we're open, we're here to support you. We understand if you feel uneasy, but we're here, the facility's locked. We do have a crisis support team that's coming in to meet with us shortly. And we're just here to support. If we're here until the families are ready to return.
Kelda, there is another school here, an international high school. They also had normal operations. I spoke to the principal earlier. He said all of the students came to school today. As for the shooting, police are asking that anyone with information contact them. We'll send it back to you.
Thanks so much, Dale. That's our Dale Manukduk reporting live from North York tonight. A 55-year-old man was charged with impaired driving causing death after a fatal crash in Markham yesterday.
A box truck had been traveling southbound where it had crossed over the center median into oncoming traffic, and it struck 2 vehicles. Unfortunately, a female was killed at the scene, and we had another female that was transported to the hospital.
The crash happened at Don Mills Road and Simonston Boulevard around 1:40 in the afternoon. The 33-year-old female driver of one of the 2 sedans hit died on scene. The driver of the second sedan was taken to hospital with minor injuries. Police say the driver of the box truck has been charged with impaired driving and dangerous operation causing death. He's set to appear in court on June 28th. Police are asking anyone who witnessed the collision or has dashcam footage to contact them. And 1 person is dead after a crash involving a car and a transport truck in Etobicoke this morning. It happened in an industrial area on Albion Road west of Highway 427 at around 10. A man was pronounced dead at the scene. A second person was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Albion Road was shut down in both directions for the investigation, but has since reopened. Firefighters battled a 3-alarm fire near Eglinton and Mount Pleasant overnight. The fire gutted 1 home and damaged another. But as Ali Chiasson reports, thankfully, everyone got out safely.
Look at the damage to these homes. It's remarkable that the 2 families who live here got out okay, especially when you see the footage. This is from a Ring camera at a neighbor's house across the street. At around 2 a.m., you see a fireball erupt from the back of number 29. The cause of that fireball is under investigation. Toronto Fire says they believe it started outside and spread quickly to the other homes. Here's what they were up against.
We had heavy flames emitting from the back of the structure. There's a large wood deck at the back of the home. We don't have point of origin at this point. And it quickly spread to the homes, and you can see we have tight exposures here, and the crews acted quickly to contain the fire to the structures of origin.
Looking at the damage here and even seeing the footage, it's really remarkable that everybody got out okay. Does this speak to the importance of having like an escape plan?
Absolutely, an escape plan and smoke detectors are always important in a home, that early detection and getting people out safe and have a meeting place outside the home.
One firefighter suffered burns, but I'm told he is going to be okay. Fire crews remain on scene monitoring for hot spots with a big focus on the back of the structure. You can see this is where most of the damage is. Neighbors say there is a fire pit back there that they've been concerned about before. We took that to the platoon chief and he says the cause is still under investigation. However, they do say that something caused the back deck to catch fire and took the opportunity to say this. A lot of neighbors here think that maybe this was started by a fire pit, an outdoor fire pit that wasn't extinguished properly. Fire safety in that regard, something to get out there?
Well, we have no information on that at this time. It's still an ongoing investigation. Our investigator will be attending. However, to that point, absolutely, outdoor fire pits should always be attended, always have a water source close by, and ensure that they're extinguished when you're done with it.
We are lucky to be talking about this fire in terms of property damage and not fatalities. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
To Brampton now, where after more than 4 weeks, the trial of 3 men charged with first-degree murder and multiple counts of attempted murder is nearing its end. In May 2021, a gunman opened fire at Chicken Land, a Mississauga takeout restaurant, killing 1 person and injuring 4 others. Today, the defense lawyers for each of the accused presented their closing arguments to the jury. Tyler Cheese brings us the latest.
The jury has now heard all it's going to from lawyers in the Chicken Land murder trial. On Monday, they heard from the Crown, who focused on the testimony of its star witness. But defense lawyers for each of the accused spent most of their closing arguments discrediting that same witness. Nearly 2 weeks ago, Mikhail Arras testified in court telling the jury his version of events surrounding the deadly shooting that took place at the Mississauga restaurant. On May 29, 2021, a man entered the Chicken Land restaurant and opened fire on the family that runs the eatery. 25-year-old Naeem Akul was killed while members of his family were injured and shot at. The Crown alleges that Anan Nath was the shooter. Suleiman Raza, whose car does appear in video evidence near the crime scene, was the getaway driver, and Nakash Abbasi masterminded the whole thing. Abbasi ran an Amazon resale warehouse where those involved in the case worked. The Crown says Akul and his family were targeted because he was planning to tell police that Abbasi was sending money to ISIS. Aras's testimony supports the Crown's position. He told the court he was invited to the warehouse 2 days after the shooting and was made to swear allegiance to an ISIS leader. Then he says the 3 accused told him the details of the murder plot. But Abbasi's defense lawyer told the jury Aras can't be trusted as a reliable witness, outlining a number of discrepancies in his testimony. Namely, much of what he said at trial was inconsistent with what he said in a police interview following the shooting. Newman argued that outside of Aras's version of events, there's no corroborating evidence showing that Abbasi was involved or that he has any ties to Islamic extremism. He also speculated that Aras himself was involved in the murder. Raza's lawyers followed a similar tact, urging the jury to ignore Aras's testimony, arguing there's no evidence showing Raza was the driver at the scene despite the car belonging to his father. Similarly, a lawyer for Nath, the accused shooter, says there's no evidence that he left the warehouse with Raza on the night of the shooting and that Aras's testimony is full of rubbish details. Now that the jury has heard all of the closing arguments, they'll return here tomorrow to hear the justice's instructions before starting deliberations. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Brampton.
It's another hot one today following yesterday's scorcher, and this toasty weather expected to continue through the week. There were some periods of intense downpour this morning, drenching the city, but as you can see, people still finding ways to enjoy the weather once the sun came out again. The humidex value reaching into the 40s at points throughout today. And Colette, I think I'll be staying indoors over the next few days.
Yeah, with the benefit of air conditioning,
Yeah.
you know, it's a whole different story when you know you have that luxury that you can
Absolutely.
go enjoy it and then jump in and cool off, right?
Yeah, not everyone has that luxury for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's for that reason and many others that we have this heat warning in place, and this will carry on through much of this week. We're kind of peaking as we go into tomorrow, today into tomorrow, and then things slowly ease. But I expect to see the heat warning right through till probably Friday. We'll see how it goes here. And then it's also the situation with the overnight lows, because they are as well so mild, so you don't really see the relief through the overnight, again, without air conditioning. And another thing that happens when you're in a heat dome and we have this stagnant pattern to our weather, so the air quality tends to deteriorate, because not only is the hot air getting trapped at the surface by the upper ridge, but pollutants, all those particulates, they get trapped near the surface as well. So low-level ozone, that tends to increase. And for those, especially with any kind of lung disease, it really can become tricky, asthma. So something to be watching for, especially through those areas. Current temperatures, well, we've dipped under 30, not the case for Kitchener or for St. Catharines, but of course we got to pull in the Humidex values, and still St. Catharines holding at 43. We were into the low 40s for Toronto as well. And you know, I was just kind of looking broadly across Ontario at different reporting stations, and I counted no less than 40 stations where the Humidex value was 40 or above. So feels like temperature really just extreme. Of course, it's over a vast area. The other thing that happens with all the moisture in the atmosphere is we get these, like we had this morning through the city, some of these thunderstorms that are bubbling up. I'll take you in for a closer look too, because again, with that moisture, it means in a short period of time, you can see, you know, 30 to 50 millimeters come down. So there's actually a special weather statement through this area, kind of through Barrie, pushing over towards Uxbridge, Newmarket, through all of that area. You've got these kind of winding through. Lightning strikes in there as well. And tomorrow it's the same kind of thing. Into the afternoon and evening hours, bubbling up here and there, we get into some thunderstorms, all right? Just be aware of it. It's not everywhere. 23 overnight tonight, an overnight low at 23 in mid-June, 32 the high tomorrow. But keep in mind, Kelda, that Humidex value again tomorrow into the low 40s.
Oh yeah, it's hot. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
A Milton woman says the landlord and tenant board discriminated against her for being pregnant. She says she hasn't been given enough time to move out of her rental unit after being evicted, despite recovering from a C-section. Lane Harrison has her story.
Christina Ribeiro thought the home she rented in Milton would be a place for her children to grow. Instead, she and her family are being evicted weeks after she's recovered from a C-section. The landlord and tenant board knew she was having the operation and considered it during the decision, but she says 2 weeks after her 6-week recovery isn't enough time.
The deadline to move out is July 31st, but July 18th is the earliest I'd be able to pick up heavy things. So how am I supposed to pack? And then also with a toddler and a newborn, that adds more challenges to the mix.
She's being evicted because her landlord filed to move in their parents, a move she believes is retaliation for not agreeing to illegal rent increases. She fought the eviction, but the board ruled in their favor. LTB adjudicators can use discretion to delay an eviction based on a tenant's circumstances. Tenant lawyer Dania Majid, who is not involved in the case, says some discretion seems to have been applied here, but it may not have been enough.
To expect this family to pack up and move in 2 weeks after such significant major surgery, and then to have, you know, a newborn, young children on top of it, I would argue, as a clinic lawyer, was not, you know, a fair or reasonable use of that discretion.
Ribeiro says on top of her surgery, finding a similar size rental in Milton has been hard given the tight market, and she's struggling to secure daycare for her children.
The stress has been very high for everyone in the family, not just me, and then that cascades down to the children as well.
Adding to the stress is when she found out about the eviction date. She says she asked for lots of notice, but received the decision a day before the C-section.
I cannot tell you the stress that I felt and the anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to give birth tomorrow morning, and yet I'm being evicted.
The 3 months it took for her to receive the decision is not abnormal, but it points to how backlogged things have become at the LTB.
It used to be back in 2018 that you would only wait 7.9 days, 8 days between when you had your hearing and when you got your order. So that's an extraordinary increase in delays that parties are experiencing.
Now, Ribeiro joins the long list of people frustrated with the tribunal.
Yeah, I had full faith going into this that things were going to turn out right and that we'd be okay, but I have no faith in the system now.
She's now seeking legal advice before officially filing for a review with the board. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
City councillors are digging into the estimated cost to rename Yonge Dundas Square today. And that comes as the agency that runs the landmark is warning of a $500,000 funding gap on the project. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords is here to break it all down for us. So Sean, the space will be renamed Sankofa Square in August. Remind us how we got here.
Well, Kelda, it's been a pretty long road to get to this meeting today, and it started back in 2021 when then Mayor John Tory and City Council voted to change the name of Dundas Street. And what's happened in the time since is the focus has changed. City Council last December under Mayor Olivia Chow opted to change the scope, really pause that full renaming of the street and really focus it instead on Yonge Dundas Square. So since then, what we understand has happened really is the board has a committee. It's been doing a lot of research. It came up with the name Sankofa Square. Sankofa is the Ghana word, a word that originates in Ghana that means looking back to move forward. Adopted that name, but there has been some controversy regarding that debate, and it came back today to the committee to discuss the full cost of the renaming. So there was a $335,000 budget. As we understand it, that came from development charges and funds there. But the agency that is in charge of the square is saying that the cost actually could run as high as $860,000. So obviously, councillors were concerned about those fees.
And Sean, what is the reason for this $500,000 funding gap, and what have councillors decided to do about it?
Well, Kelda, what we understand is that there's a variety of options. You know, the board could simply move forward and just change the signs, but they'd like to spend more money to contribute to an education campaign to really refresh the square. And what councillors essentially were saying today is if you want to do that, what you'll have to do is get more in-kind support, donations, corporate sponsors to help do that. And the city has contributed money, but it really can't take any further cash from the tax base to contribute there. Now, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding this debate, dating all the way back to 2021. I spoke with Councillor Chris Moyse, who's really been spearheading this effort, and he's been pushing back against suggestions that there wasn't a lot of consultation here. He's saying that actually what he's been encountering as he's been working on this process is a lot of anti-Black racism, people pushing back, really in his view, for the wrong reasons here, and he was really urging fellow councillors not to back down to that. Here's a clip from him, a quote. Here, let's listen to what he had to say earlier today.
Well, if we did nothing, did not rename Sankofa Square, you're saying to the Black people in this city, not only Black people, but people from the Somali community, from the Asian community, you're saying to them, you know what, you don't really matter, you don't count.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Sean, this has been quite a controversial process. What are critics saying about this whole rebranding?
Well, there are critics, as you mentioned, Kelda. They are looking at the cost. You know, all of this is done in the specter of the financial constraints the city is constantly finding itself in. billion-dollar deficits, billion-dollar plus deficits some years down here at City Hall. And, you know, people are being asked to constrain costs across all departments. So that is being focused on with this process as well. And Councillor Stephen Holliday is saying beyond that, he doesn't actually think that this process has the same amount of support that he'd like to see, a broad support across the city. Let's hear from Holliday. Here's him from a scrum earlier today.
Most of the people that I hear from are tired about hearing renaming Dundas, tired about hearing new names like Sankofa. Over and over again, people say, just leave it alone. Use that money for something else more productive.
So that's Councillor Holliday's view, but it was not the view of Mayor Olivia Chow's executive committee today. They voted unanimously in support again of the renaming and really were in favor of continuing along this process and ensuring that the name change happens on August the 1st to recognize Emancipation Day. Kelda, back to you. All
right, thanks so much for this, Sean. That's our Municipal Affairs reporter, Sean Jeffords. The union representing LCBO workers say they're ready to strike in a little over 2 weeks if they can't reach a deal with the corporation.
We've been meeting with the LCBO since March, and they're not listening. So something's got to give. The LCBO has refused to negotiate with us in any meaningful way. They have not engaged with any of our proposals.
The union says part-time employees make up 70% of their workforce. They're seeking more full-time jobs and wage increases. Over the weekend, 97% of workers voted in favor of strike action if necessary. The union says workers are fearful of job losses after Doug Ford announced plans to allow convenience and grocery stores to sell beer, wine, and ready-to-drink cocktails. If no agreement is reached, workers could begin job action at midnight on July 5th. 4 different Ontario towns say they missed out on millions of dollars in new housing money. They say it's because a federal agency is miscounting. But the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is standing behind its numbers. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop takes us through the fight.
Here's the evidence. Just fix your report to the province and everything will be fine.
Oakville's mayor says that stack of papers is construction permits from last year and that his town had just over 2,700 of them. But the number from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is way lower, almost 950 less than that.
That meant that we missed out on $10 million.
Ajax says it's the victim of a housing miscount too, in that case costing $4 million.
We had one instance where it was 2 buildings that shared a single foundation, and one building was counted against our total, and the other one wasn't. So right off the bat, that was that accounted for 25% of our target.
The loss of money is from the province's Building Faster Fund, handed over to municipalities that make their housing targets. The province uses data from the federal agency CMHC. The municipalities allege it made mistakes. 2 other municipalities also allege counting errors for housing starts, Cambridge and Clarington. Among all 4 towns, it adds up to more than $23 million in lost funding. CMHC says it stands behind its numbers. It says housing starts are verified every month with staff visiting construction sites, and it says as part of its process, it uses data from municipal building permits. CMHC says it calculates a new housing start from when a concrete foundation is poured. But that's the same way municipalities say they do it.
If I miscounted something and I hurt you as a result, I would want to fix it. I'd like a federal government that I can count on to be able to count. I want honest counts from government.
Mayor Burton moved a motion at the most recent Ontario Big City Mayors meeting. It passed unanimously. It calls on CMHC to fix any mistakes in its numbers and asks the province to revisit the data and pay municipalities if there were faulty calculations. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Millions of Canadians are sweltering under a heat dome this week. Warnings stretch across large parts of Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. As Adel Moussa reports, experts warn these hot, humid conditions pose health risks for both people and animals alike.
From Ontario to Atlantic Canada, millions of Canadians are under a heat warning as high heat and humidity reach what experts call dangerous levels.
I'm a little bit nervous, to be honest with you. Based on what happened in British Columbia last summer, it was extreme, like really extreme.
I like it right now. I have a feeling my feelings will change by August.
Montreal will feel like 40 degrees Celsius during the worst of it this week. This shelter is one place where people can cool down, get some water, and escape the extreme heat.
People can die from the heat, just like they can die from the cold.
It's all happening because of a heat dome, a high-pressure weather system that pushes hot air down near the Earth's surface and traps it, causing the temperature to rise.
Not only do you have the heat, but also you have the poor air quality from the fact the sun will cook the chemicals coming out of our tailpipes and smokestacks. It's just the whole day, morning, noon, and night. We can't escape it.
And neither can animals like these polar bears at the Toronto Zoo. There's a pool, ice machines, and plenty of shade to keep them cool. The extreme heat is something zookeepers are paying close attention to keep animals safe.
I think what's really interesting is how everybody is starting to get far more tuned into weather, into climate change, and what that means for our needs. Well, we have to think about that for our animals' needs.
When it comes to humans, experts say it's especially important for the vulnerable, like seniors, children, and those experiencing homelessness, to stay cool and avoid intense physical activity during these high temperatures. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Students across the country are also feeling the extreme heat. Most are in classrooms that don't have air conditioning and updated cooling and ventilation systems. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson spoke with students, parents, and administrators about how they're coping with the sweltering conditions.
Grade 4 student Abigail Lafeve says that on hot days it's hard to concentrate in class.
And it's usually like 27, 28, 29, sometimes even 30.
Like many schools across Canada, Abigail's doesn't have air conditioning.
There's so many kids at our school that are leaving early because they are sick. They're pale, they're complaining that they're going to throw up.
With heat waves starting as early as May and lasting well into the fall, climate change impacts are felt by Canada's students. This is not the classroom heat you may remember as a child. It's more intense and could last for months.
Heat is underappreciated as a hazard, but it's responsible for more illnesses and deaths than all other natural weather hazards. For children in schools, it reduces their ability to learn.
We emailed provincial and territorial ministries of education. Some answered our questions about how they're tackling overheated classrooms. BC Ministry of Education said that it upgraded HVAC systems in 400 schools since 2020 to the tune of $300 million. Alberta said school boards have the autonomy, accountability, and responsibility to ensure their facilities are responsive to extreme weather conditions. A similar sentiment was expressed by education ministries in several other provinces. But this Ontario School Board trustee does not buy it.
The money that the government gives us isn't enough. And in this day and age, it's unacceptable.
At her initiative, a dozen schools in Toronto Catholic School Board are piloting a project, misting stations where kids can cool off.
It's nice when the mist hits you because it's like a big relief, you know?
It's a solution, but not exactly for the problem we have. It doesn't solve the heat in the classrooms.
As parents and educators fight to make schools a safe and comfortable place to learn in a changing climate. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The risks of extreme heat have become a serious concern ahead of the Summer Olympics next month. Experts say the Games in Paris could be among the hottest on record. Susan Ormiston takes a look at the concerns.
The Tokyo Olympics were the hottest ever, up to 34 degrees and 70% humidity. Paris could be as bad or worse.
I think there's a fatal risk because as an athlete you are programmed to push your body to the absolute limits, and yeah, athletes aren't going to pull back. So if we are competing in these hotter conditions, yeah, it's definitely scary.
Last summer, blistering heat in France killed 5,000 people. Last month was the hottest on record globally, and Europe is the fastest warming continent. Athletes and scientists are ringing an alarm bell. In a new report, Rings of Fire 2, Sebastian Coe, 4-time Olympic medalist, says climate change should be viewed as an existential threat to sport. Heat plus humidity plus exertion can cause nausea, cramps, even heat stroke.
35 degrees. And yeah, I've felt as the temperature got up, it's got steadily harder and harder.
We really need to be asking ourselves, are we pushing them too far? Are we putting them into situations that are too dangerous?
The Paris Organizing Committee has vowed these games will be the greenest ever. So no air conditioning in the athletes' village. Built instead with sunshades and in-floor cooling. But heat is such a worry, some teams are considering bringing their own portable AC.
In and out of the front.
I am really bad in the heat. Canadian rower Jenny Casson says Olympic organizers should weigh climate effects significantly.
I don't think it's as simple anymore as choosing the country with the highest bid. You have to weigh in other factors, or else you're not going to have the games. Like, you're going to have athletes who are barely alive and unable to perform at their best.
The report recommends adjusting timing or venues, and less interest in oil and gas sponsors. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
A heat dome is also affecting much of the U.S. Midwest and Northeast. Forecasters say hundreds of records could be shattered daily from the dangerously high temperatures. Tens of millions of Americans from Chicago to Detroit and Maine are coping with the most severe heat wave in over a decade. Temperatures in some places are expected to hit 105 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 45 degrees Celsius. Like many parts of Canada, forecasts show several straight days ahead of relentless high temperatures and humidity. Much of the U.S. Midwest and Northeast are under heat warnings or watches. Pop star Justin Timberlake has been arrested on drunk driving charges in Long Island, New York. Police say he ran a stop sign and veered out of his lane in Sag Harbor in the Hamptons shortly after midnight. Timberlake had bloodshot eyes, alcohol on his breath, and performed poorly on a sobriety test, according to officers. The charge comes amid his first world tour in years. The 43-year-old performer began his career as a Disney Mouseketeer, then rose to fame in the boy band NSYNC. He embarked on a hugely successful solo career in 2002. Over the years, he's won acclaim in a number of movies and has 10 Grammys and 4 Emmy Awards. Aerospace giant Boeing has been under intense scrutiny because of crashes and a string of other safety failures. Today, the company's CEO was grilled by American lawmakers while the families of victims, including some Canadians, looked on. Katie Simpson reports.
The families who lost loved ones in the Boeing MAX 737 crashes gathered at the U.S. Capitol to witness the company's CEO be grilled by lawmakers over safety violations. Clarisse Moore drove 9 hours from Toronto to honor her daughter Danielle, who was killed in the Ethiopian air crash.
Did she cry for me? Did she know that will be his last breath? Did someone hold their hands? So Cajon, Boeing, CEO, management, did you hear my daughter cry?
In the room, they held photos of their loved ones, waiting for Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun to take his seat. He acknowledged their presence, unexpectedly standing up during his opening statement to offer his condolences.
I would like to apologize on behalf of all of our Boeing associates spread throughout the world, past and present, for your losses. They're gut-wrenching.
Calhoun dodged direct questions about what Boeing has done to improve safety and quality, and was grilled about the damning allegations made by whistleblowers the company cuts corners to maximize profit.
The American people, they're in danger. For your workers, they're in peril. For your whistleblowers, they literally fear for their lives, but you're getting compensated like never before. Don't you think maybe your priorities are misplaced here? I mean, don't you think maybe it's time to get back to focusing on making quality planes?
I don't recognize any of the Boeing you described.
Really?
And I want to assure...
You don't recognize the Boeing that has airplanes falling out of the sky?
U.S. lawmakers are preparing to possibly recommend Boeing be criminally charged for failing to improve safety despite promises to do so in the wake of the deadly 737 MAX crashes, while the Department of Justice has opened a separate investigation into the Air Alaska mid-flight blowout. These families are demanding and hoping there will be criminal charges, a step toward the accountability they've long demanded. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Individual Canadians are not the only ones struggling with high interest rates in this country. Small and medium businesses are also having trouble making ends meet. That's in the findings of a survey out today from Equifax Canada. Scott Peterson has the details.
This survey out this morning is showing basically the same thing that's happening with individual Canadians incurring more debt from month to month. Same thing is happening with small and medium-sized businesses. And this is according to Equifax Canada. And they're the group that keeps track of debit and credit card payments on the front lines to see what these small and medium businesses are doing. Let's take a look at some of the effects and some of the results of this survey that's out this morning from, again, from Equifax. There has been a 74% jump in installment loans loans at the later part of 2023. This is in order to pay back for a lot of businesses that took out the Canada Emergency Business Account loans in order to pay that back to get the free forgiveness on that. Also, delinquency rates. This is a serious one as well. That's up over 12% in the first quarter of this year. And this is a delinquency not paying bills for longer than 30 days between businesses and suppliers. And that's a troubling statistic, because if you're not paying a supplier, that supplier will not supply what that business needs to continue to exist. Also, we're looking at total debt outstanding, which is creeping up for a lot of small businesses and medium businesses out there. Outstanding trade balances are up 7.5% to a new record of $32 billion of total accumulated debt out there. That is a record high as far as what's being accumulated for small businesses. And again, a footnote here, smaller, medium type of businesses are really the backbone of the Canadian economy. They are responsible for the majority of employment in the country, and a lot of economic benefits are spun off from this these very entities. And also, they're looking at we saw our first rate reduction from the Bank of Canada. So clearly, a lot of people, individual Canadians, as well as a lot of small, medium, and large businesses, for that matter, are hoping for more rate cuts to make things more affordable in the near future. Scott Peterson, CBC News, Toronto.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX rose 23 points, the Dow climbed 57 points, and the dollar traded up to 72.87 cents US. We'll be right back. The family of a Vancouver woman who was forced to transfer hospitals before she could receive medical assistance in dying is suing the BC government and Providence Health. They say the Catholic healthcare provider's ban on MAID at its facilities violates the charter rights of patients. Katie DeRosa has more.
She just wanted to die with dignity.
Samantha O'Neill's parents say she had so much to live for before being diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2022.
She was an active, caring, loving, vegan marathoner.
But when the young woman's cancer became too much to bear, she asked for medical assistance in dying, or MAID.
So for her to arrive at dying by MAID wasn't something that she wanted to do at 34 years old.
Because O'Neill was treated at St. Paul's Hospital, she was told she'd have to be transferred to a different facility. St. Paul's is operated by Providence Healthcare, a Catholic organization that opposes medical assistance in dying and does not allow it in its facilities, even though it receives public funding. Instead, O'Neill was taken to a hospice where staff from Vancouver Coastal Health would be able to administer her end-of-life medication. But she had to be sedated to the point of unconsciousness before they could take her.
And we get to say goodbye while she's sitting on the commode. It's just the most disgusting thing that Providence Healthcare can do to someone in their last hours and their family.
O'Neill died on April 4th, 2023. Now her family is suing the province and Providence Health, saying its policy banning MAID violates the charter rights of patients.
Forced transfers hurt people, and we don't want to see what happened to Sam happen to anybody else.
A Vancouver-based palliative care doctor who quit over Providence's ban on MAID is also part of the lawsuit.
The fundamental thing is Providence's religious beliefs are really being inflicted on me.
Jaya Raman says even though BC's health ministry is setting up a clinical space that allows MAID next to St. Paul's, forced transfers are still happening.
I've done 4 transfers this week, 4, all from St. Paul's. And these are very sick patients.
None of the allegations have been proven in court. Dying with Dignity Canada, a party to the lawsuit, says there are other faith-based agencies like Providence across Canada that also deny MAID services in their facilities. So a judgment here in BC could reverberate across the country. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
A Toronto woman is calling a TTC employee her guardian angel, crediting her for saving her life. It all started when Michelle Marie Beer started feeling dizzy while riding the streetcar last month. Brittany Billette takes us through what happened.
I'm alive,
because of this amazing woman that wouldn't let me off a streetcar because she saw me.
Michelle Marie Beer hasn't made it home yet from a May 31st Jays game. She went from a 510 streetcar straight to the ER at St. Mike's Hospital by ambulance. Now she's recovering from an emergency brain surgery that removed a life-threatening tumor she didn't know she had. She may still not have known about it if she hadn't met this streetcar driver who she now calls her guardian angel.
Had I gone home that night and fallen, I would have either slipped into a coma, lost my eyesight because it was attached to the nerve, or died. That's how close it was to being done.
To this day, it's surreal. Like I didn't think it would turn into something this big. To know that it went so far as to saving a life, I'm humbled. Truly.
Monique Blake was driving the streetcar and had just unloaded passengers at Spadina Station when she spotted Beer sitting down, looking flushed and in distress.
And I noticed when she got up, she was shaking. She had tremors in her, it was like her left hand. And I was like, okay, that's not good.
Beer protested, not wanting to hold up service. She thought she was having a post-concussion dizzy spell. In January, she fell and hit her head, exiting the same 510 streetcar. But when Blake saw her, she knew something more was wrong and wouldn't let her leave the station until she got medical attention first.
My mom is actually a retired nurse, and she I guess in her coming home after she worked at a senior's home, she'd make mention sometimes of people with brain injury, how they had tremors. And that was something that kind of triggered in my mind that maybe, something like that is happening.
Turns out that Beer needed to remove a tumor that had been growing for years. And she says it wasn't just taking a toll on her health, but her happiness.
I spent the last 5 years thinking I wanted to die because I was in such a dark place because of the tumor, unbeknownst to me, eating my brain.
Beer says her and Monique's story is incredibly poetic because the theme of the Jays game she was at earlier that life-changing evening was City Connect.
A TTC operator saves the life of the world's biggest Blue Jays fan on City Connect. Like, what connects the city? The TTC.
Blake says the message in this story is that it's okay to ask for help and to accept help when someone offers.
You're not inconveniencing anyone to ask for help. If you need help, you need help. And I do believe that even though we do live in a fast-paced environment, if you do reach out for help, people will take the time to help because, we all need that human connection.
Blake and Beer have both been invited to share their story at a TTC board meeting at City Hall Thursday, and that's where Blake will be acknowledged for her outstanding service. Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, Colette is back with more on this heat, because that's pretty much a story of the week, right? This intense, sweltering heat.
The heat, the humidity, and then
All
the
of it.
thunderstorms that bubble up as well because of the moisture in the atmosphere. So, yeah, let's go through all of it, okay? We did have a warned storm, actually, that now that warning has been lifted, but through new Tecumseh and through this region. But you can still see where some of these cells are and all of the lightning strikes in here. And there's still, a special weather statement, which I'll get to and show you that area just for the heavier downpours. So closer look at that one, taking off the lightning strikes, putting them back on, and there's your area. So throughout this whole section, with these rolling through, you can get some heavy downpours in a short period of time and some pretty gusty winds. So it's more of a just heads up, be aware, and then if any of them become severe, that's when the watches and the warnings for those go out. But like I said, the warning we had has been lifted. We do have some wet weather, the remnants of these pushing into the Niagara region as well. So here and there, everywhere is the heat warning, and that's not just for the daytime temperatures and humidity, but overnight as well, because they really don't get relief, especially without air conditioning. And the other thing that happens with this heat dome, that subsidence, that sinking air, which causes the temperatures to just keep rising and be trapped, also traps a lot of particulates and pollutants. And so we begin to see these special air quality statements go out. And anyone with some underlying conditions, any kind of lung disease, you really need to heed those when we're getting into them. Daytime highs, having a look, 32 for Toronto, 33 for St. Catharines and Windsor as well. And then even looking at the current temperatures, still lots of readings, obviously in the upper 20s, but still some 30s on the board as well. And then we factor in all that moisture and those high dew points. So St. Catharines, it still feels like 43. The nation's capital still feels like 42 there. And Windsor coming at 41, Sarnia at 40. So truly oppressive. As we go through the overnight hours, we'll see things kind of winding down, and then through the day on Wednesday. And we're going to kind of see this, it's in my forecast pretty much every day, that into the afternoon, showers and thunderstorms bubble up. We may get that line kind of coming, it looks like at first towards north portions of the GTA, but then swinging down towards the city, and that's likely after 6 o'clock. So you were wanting to be aware if you've got plans in this heat to be on a patio or something, or outside barbecuing, or whatever it is tomorrow evening, a bike ride, because you're trying to do it, early or late in the day. Just keep your eye to the sky and know what's going on there. 32 degrees, the high on Wednesday. So we're kind of into this peak between today and tomorrow. It's going to feel like closer to 42. Still it into Thursday, the first day of summer. We get some relief towards the weekend.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
That's our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. There will be no late local newscast tonight due to NHL playoffs. We will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everyone.